The afternoon sun, warm and buttery, spilled through the grand windows of Graceland, painting stripes of light across the plush carpet. 6-year-old Lisa Marie, with her bright eyes and a mischievous dimple that sometimes peeked out when she smiled, found herself in a quiet corner of the house. Too quiet. Almost. Normally, Graceland buzzed with laughter, music, and the constant hum of life around her. Daddy Elvis. But today, a peaceful stillness had settled, a hush that meant only one thing. Daddy was napping. Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was legendary for his nap. He could fall asleep anywhere, at any time, especially after a long night of songwriting rehearsals or just being Elvis. And when he slept deep like a big contented bear. Lisa Marie loved these quiet moments, though sometimes they left her feeling a little bored. She'd already played with her dolls, raced her tricycle around the winding paths of the estate, and even tried to teach the family dogs a new trick, which mostly involved them wagging their tails enthusiastically and then wandering off. Now, with nothing else to do, she wandered into her mother Priscilla's dressing room. It was a wonderland of shimmering fabrics, sparkling jewels, and the soft scent of perfume. Lisa Marie wasn't supposed to touch most things in here, but sometimes when curiosity got the better of her, she'd peek. Today, her eyes landed on a treasure chest of colors, Mama's makeup kit. It wasn't just a small pouch. It was a large, elegant box filled with tiny pots of cream, long, slender tubes, and brushes of all shapes and sizes. She recognized the lipstick tubes, some of them a dazzling red, others a soft pink. There were little compacts with rosy blush and trays of shimmering powders in every shade of the rainbow. To Lisa Marie, it looked like a paint box for grown-ups, full of magical pigments that could change faces. She reached out a hesitant finger, tracing the cool, smooth surface of a lipstick tube. It was a brilliant, almost shocking cherry red. She pulled it out, twisting the bottom until the red stick of color peeked out like a tiny, shiny crayon. She'd seen Mama put it on 1,000 times, transforming her already beautiful lips into an even more vibrant smile. A tiny, mischievous giggle bubbled up from deep inside her. Mama always looked so pretty, with makeup. And Daddy was always handsome, even when he was just waking up, his dark hair a little mussed, his eyes still heavy with sleep. But what if Daddy wore makeup? The idea hit her like a playful splash of cool water. Her eyes widened, and the dimple appeared deeper than usual. She imagined it. Elvis, the king, with bright red lips and rosy cheeks. It was such a silly, funny thought that another giggle escaped, quickly muffled by her hand. Her heart started to beat a little faster. It was a daring idea, a secret mission that only she could undertake. But a tiny voice, the one that sounded a lot like Mama, whispered, "Lisa Marie, you shouldn't touch Mama's things, and definitely not put them on Daddy." She hesitated. Would he be mad? Elvis was usually so sweet, so kind, so full of love. She pictured his face when he woke up all surprised. Would he laugh or would he just look confused? The thought of his reaction, whatever it might be, was too tempting to resist. The desire to see the king of rock and roll transformed, even just for a moment by her own hands, grew stronger than any whispered warning. It wasn't about being naughty. Not really. It was about love and fun and a child's boundless imagination. She wanted to do something special, something that would make her daddy smile, even if it was a silly, bewildered smile. A plan began to form in her young mind. She would be very, very quiet. She would be very, very careful. And she would choose the most perfect colors for her masterpiece. The sun continued to stream through the window, no longer just bright, but now feeling like a conspirator silently urging her on. The mission was on, and it was going to be the most exciting art project she had ever attempted. With her decision made, Lisa Marie moved with the stealth of a tiny turn. She carefully selected her tools from Priscilla's vast makeup collection. First, the lipstick. The bright cherry red was too bold, too obvious. She needed something subtle, something that would blend in just enough to be a surprise, but not a shock. Her eyes landed on a tube of soft rose pink, a color Priscilla often wore when she wanted a more natural look. Perfect. It wouldn't scream makeup disaster, but it would definitely be noticeable. Next, the blush. There were powders and creams, but the cream blush in a little pot looked easiest to apply with her finger. She chose a delicate peach shade, thinking how it would add a healthy glow to Daddy's pale skin after his nap. Finally, for a truly artistic touch, she spotted a small, shimmering eyeshadow. Compact, it was a soft, silvery blue. She wasn't entirely sure where eyeshadow went, but it looked pretty. And Daddy had such long eyelashes. Maybe it would make his eyes sparkle even more. With her chosen arsenal gathered, she stacked them carefully in her small, curious hands. Her heart thumped a nervous rhythm against her ribs. This wasn't like playing with dolls. This was a real live king, and he was sleeping soundly. She had to be extra quiet. She tiptoed out of the dressing room, the soft, thick carpet muffling her footsteps. The air in Graceland felt hushed, almost holding its breath as she made her way to Elvis's bedroom. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness visible within. She pushed it open slowly, painstakingly, so it wouldn't creak. The room was cool and dim, the heavy drapes drawn against the afternoon sun. There he was, Elvis. Stretched out on his king-sized bed, a light sheet pulled up to his waist. His arms were flung out slightly, and his dark hair was tousled against the white pillow. He looked so peaceful, so handsome, even in sleep. His chest rose and fell with slow, steady breaths, a sound that usually comforted her, but today only amplified her own racing heartbeat. She approached the bed like a tiny explorer charting unknown territory. Her bare feet made no sound on the thick rug. She stood by the side of the bed, peering up at her sleeping giant. He looked so big, so powerful, even asleep. And here she was, this small person, about to embark on a very important, very secret mission. She held her breath, listening. Only the faint sounds of the house, a distant bird chirping outside, and Elvis's gentle breathing filled the air. She lifted the tube of pink lipstick. Her hand trembled slightly. His lips, usually so full of laughter and song, were relaxed and slightly parted. She hesitated for a fraction of a second, her tiny brow furrowed in concentration. Then, with the delicate precision of a surgeon, she touched the tip of the lipstick to his upper lip. It was a strange feeling, like drawing on a soft, warm cloud. She traced the line of his lip, then moved to the lower one. She didn't press too hard, just enough to leave a faint, rosy tint. It wasn't perfect, a little bit smudged outside the lines, but she was only 6 after all. She pulled back, admiring her work. A soft pink pout now adorned the king's face. A tiny, triumphant giggle escaped her quickly, stifled by her hand. She pressed her lips together, biting them to keep from laughing louder. She looked around as if expecting someone to suddenly appear and catch her in the act. But the room remained silent, save for Elvis's rhythmic breathing. Emboldened by her initial success, she moved on to the blush. She opened the small pot, scooping a tiny amount of the peach cream onto her fingertip. She looked at his cheeks, so pale and smooth in the dim light. Gently, ever so gently, she dabbed the blush onto his left cheek, then his right. She tried to rub it in, like she'd seen Mama do, but it mostly just left 2 faint, peachy smudges. Still, it added a touch of color, a rosy glow. Finally, the eyeshadow. This was the trickiest part. His eyelids were closed, long lashes fanned out. She dabbed the silvery blue powder onto her smallest finger and carefully, very carefully, touched it to his right eyelid, then the left. It was a little clumpy, a bit uneven, but it gave him a peculiar, shimmering sheen, as if he'd just emerged from a dream. She stepped back, her small hands on her hips, admiring her completed masterpiece. Elvis Presley, the king, was now wearing a full face of delicate child-applied makeup. He looked well. He looked ridiculous, but in the most charming, innocent way possible. The pink lips were slightly askew, the blush was more blotches than blend, and the blue eyeshadow gave him a surprisingly whimsical air. A huge smile spread across Lisa Marie's face. This was better than any doll, any game. This was her daddy, and she had transformed him, even if just for a little while. The anticipation of his awakening and his reaction bubbled inside her. A mix of nervous excitement and pure, unadulterated joy. The stealth operation was complete now for the grand reveal. With the first layer of makeup applied, Lisa Marie felt a surge of artistic confidence. The initial trepidation had vanished, replaced by a focused determination. This wasn't just a prank. It was a serious art project. And a true artist always checks her work and adds the finishing touches. She circled the bed, examining her handiwork from different angles. Pink lipstick, while subtle, definitely gave Daddy's mouth a new, softer look. But maybe it needed a bit more pop. She uncapped the bright cherry red lipstick, the one she'd initially rejected for being too bold. Now it felt like just the right accent. Very carefully, she layered a tiny bit of the red over the pink, concentrating on the very center of his lips. The result was a surprisingly vibrant, somewhat plumped, look like a slightly smudged Valentine's heart. She giggled again. A soft, bubbly sound that wouldn't wake a mouse, let alone a sleeping king. Next the blush, the two peach smudges weren't quite doing it, for her mama always had a lovely even glow. Lisa Marie decided more was better. She dabbed generous amounts of the cream blush onto both of her pointer fingers and proceeded to rub it onto Elvis's cheeks in wide, circular motions. She imagined she was polishing an apple. His skin was so soft and warm. When she was done, his cheeks were a definite rosy hue, like he'd just come in from a brisk walk on a chilly day. It looked less like subtle enhancement and more like a fever, but she thought it was quite charming. The eyeshadow was still her favorite part. The silvery blue on his eyelids shimmered faintly in the dim light. But what if she added another color? Priscilla had so many. Lisa Marie rummaged through the compacts again. Her eyes landed on a small pot of glitter, gold glitter. Oh, this was brilliant. Mama used it for special occasions, making her eyes sparkle like stars. Daddy needed sparkle. She very gently scooped a tiny pinch of the fine gold glitter onto her fingertip. Her heart beat a little faster. This was high-level artistry. She leaned in close, so close she could feel the soft puff of his breath on her cheek. Carefully, she sprinkled the glitter onto his eyelids. Over the blue, some of it caught on his long dark lashes. Some of it drifted onto his eyebrows. And a little bit even landed on the bridge of his nose, creating a faint, shimmering galaxy. Perfect, she whispered to herself, stepping back to admire her work. Elvis Presley, king of rock and roll, was now adorned with rosy pink and red lips, flushed peach cheeks, and shimmering blue and gold glitter. Eyeshadow. He looked like a very regal, very sleepy clown, or perhaps a fantastical creature from a storybook. Just as she was admiring her masterpiece, Elvis stirred. Her heart leaped into her throat, her breath caught. She froze like a tiny statue, her hands still clutching the makeup tools. He let out a soft groan, shifting his head on the pillow. His eyelids fluttered just a tiny bit, as if light was trying to peek through. Lisa Marie held her breath, her eyes wide with a mix of terror and anticipation. Oh no, was he waking up? Was she caught? She frantically looked around for a place to hide. The drapes, thick and heavy, they offered perfect concealment. She quickly but quietly darted behind the velvet curtains, peeking out from a tiny gap. Her body pressed against the wall. Elvis groaned again, a little louder this time, and shifted his weight. He rubbed a hand slowly across his face, just missing the glitter on his nose. Lisa Marie squeezed her eyes shut. What if he felt the lipstick? What if he felt the blush? But then he settled again, letting out a deep sigh. His breathing returned to its slow, even rhythm. He hadn't woken up, not fully anyway. He was just readjusting, deep in his sleep. Lisa Marie let out a slow, silent breath. She hadn't realized. She was holding. Her heart was still hammering. But relief for now, and her artwork was still intact. She peered out from behind the curtain. Elvis, still adorned with his new facial art, looked utterly unaware. A triumphant smile slowly spread across Lisa Marie's face. Again she had done it. She had pulled off the most daring, most artistic makeup application Graceland had ever seen. Now, all she had to do was wait for the grand reveal. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but utterly delicious. She settled in, ready for the show. The minutes stretched on, feeling like hours to Lisa Marie. Hiding behind the heavy velvet drapes, she peered out, watching her sleeping father. Light familiar footsteps coming down the hallway. It was Mama Priscilla. Lisa Marie's eyes widened. Oh no! Priscilla was probably coming to check on Elvis, or perhaps to wake him for some scheduled appointment. And when she saw him, a fresh wave of panic washed over Lisa. Marie, Mama would surely know who the culprit was. And while Mama was always loving, she also believed in rules. Rules about not touching her makeup. Rules about not drawing on people even if they were sleeping. Lisa Marie pressed herself tighter against the wall behind the curtain, wishing she could become invisible. The footsteps stopped right outside the bedroom door. Priscilla must have stepped further into the room. Lisa Marie could hear the gentle swish of her dress. Elvis, she called again, a little closer this time. She probably stood by the side of the bed just as Lisa Marie had done earlier. Lisa Marie imagined Priscilla looking down at him, her beautiful face probably smiling at her sleeping husband. Then there was a sound that made Lisa Marie's stomach flip. A tiny gasp. Not a horrified gasp, but a surprised, muffled one. Priscilla had seen it. She had seen the rosy lips, the peachy cheeks, the glittery eyelids. Lisa Marie braced herself for a laugh, or a scolding, or a shout. But Priscilla remained silent for a moment. Then Lisa Marie heard a very soft, very low chuckle, a laugh that was trying hard to be quiet, but couldn't quite be contained. It was a fond, amused chuckle. This was good. Lisa Marie thought Mama wasn't mad. She was laughing. Just as Priscilla's soft chuckles filled the room, Elvis stirred again, more purposefully this time. His head shifted, his hands moved, stretching a little above his head. He let out a long, deep groan, the kind of sound a person makes when they are slowly, reluctantly coming back to the world. Lisa Marie's heart began to pound, a frantic drumbeat against her ribs. This was it. The king was waking up. The grand reveal was just moments away. She tightened her grip on the edge of the curtain, peeking out through the tiny gap, her eyes fixed on her father's face. His eyelids fluttered slowly, agonizingly slowly. They began to open. First, just a slit, revealing a sliver of dark, sleepy eye. Then wider. His gaze was blurry at first, unfocused. He blinked a few times, trying to adjust to the dim light of the room. He blinked again, and then, his eyes, still heavy with sleep, slowly moved. First, they landed on Priscilla, who was standing by the bed, her hand gently covering her mouth, her eyes dancing with amusement. He must have seen the suppressed laughter in her eyes, because a flicker of confusion crossed his face. Then his gaze drifted. He looked around the room, still a bit groggy, his hands still sleep-heavy. Would he smudge it all off? Would he feel the unfamiliar textures? But just as his fingers were about to meet his cheek, he seemed to pause. His eyes, now a little more focused, seemed to catch sight of something unusual, something on his face. Lisa Marie watched, completely enthralled, as a tiny frown creased his brow. He wasn't quite awake enough to fully process what he was seeing, or rather, what he was feeling. He seemed to sense something was different. Something was there that shouldn't be. The moment stretched, thick with anticipation. The king was on the verge of discovery. Lisa Marie clutched the curtain, her entire small body vibrating with nervous excitement. She couldn't wait to see his reaction. This was going to be better than any movie. Elvis blinked slowly a few more times. The frown on his forehead deepened. He wasn't fully awake, but he sensed something was off. He could feel a faint stickiness on his lips, a slight coolness on his cheeks, and a strange, almost gritty sensation on his eyelids. It wasn't the usual feeling of a good, solid nap. He brought a hand to his mouth, fingers touching his lips. He rubbed them gently, then pulled his hand away. His eyes, still not entirely clear, glanced at his fingertips. They looked faintly pink. He frowned harder. Pink, what on earth was he dreaming? He pushed himself up, propping himself on his elbows, his dark hair falling across his forehead. He looked at Priscilla, who was still standing by the bed, her hand pressed firmly against her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent laughter. Her eyes were sparkling with mirth, a clear sign that she knew exactly what was going on. "Priscilla, honey," he mumbled, his voice still thick with sleep. "What's so funny? Why are you looking at me like that?" He reached up again, this time touching his cheek. It felt a little sticky, a little different. He rubbed it. Priscilla, trying her best to compose herself, finally managed to speak, though her voice was still laced with giggles. "Elvis, darling," she managed to get out. You look very distinguished." Distinguished. Elvis was more confused than ever. He wasn't feeling distinguished. He was feeling like he'd slept with his face in a pile of cotton candy. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, pushing himself into a sitting position. He felt a weird fluttery sensation around his eyes as he blinked. "Distinguished, huh?" he grumbled good-naturedly, running a hand through his hair. "Well, I don't know what you're talking about, darling. I just woke up." He stretched his broad shoulders, flexing beneath his thin sleep shirt. As he stretched, his gaze drifted across the room. On the wall opposite his bed, a large ornate mirror hung, reflecting the room back at him, and in that reflection he saw himself. His eyes widened. His sleepy frown transformed into a look of utter bewilderment. He stared at his reflection, then looked back at Priscilla, then back at the mirror again, as if to make sure his eyes weren't playing tricks on him. There he was, Elvis Presley, the king. But not quite. His lips, usually a natural healthy color, were now a distinct shimmering pinkish red like a cherry lollipop. His cheeks, usually just a little tanned, were flushed with a surprising peach color, as if he'd spent the last hour vigorously scrubbing his face. And his eyelids were an iridescent mix of silvery blue and sparkling gold, like a tiny disco ball had exploded on his face. His long lashes, already dark and prominent, seemed to shimmer with tiny golden specks. He looked absolutely ridiculous and utterly adorable. From her hiding spot behind the curtain, Lisa Marie watched her breath held tight in her chest. She saw the moment he saw himself. She saw his eyes widen, his jaw drop just a little. She saw the confusion, the dawning realization, and then slowly a tiny twitch at the corner of his lips. He raised a hand, tracing his painted lips with a hesitant finger. He touched his cheek, then his eyelid, feeling the texture of the makeup, the faint grittiness of the glitter. He still looked utterly bewildered, but there was no anger, no immediate outburst. Just a profound, almost comical disbelief. He slowly turned his head, his eyes scanning the room, as if searching for an explanation for the phantom artist who had dared to adorn the king's face. His gaze swept over the chair, the dresser, the nightstand, and then it landed on the slight bulge of the velvet curtain. He probably saw the tiny gap, the little pair of curious eyes peeking out. Lisa Marie froze. She had been caught. But the look on his face wasn't angry. It was something else. Something she couldn't quite decipher. She slowly, very slowly began to emerge from her hiding spot, a tiny sheepish smile playing on her lips. Her masterpiece was complete, and the artist was about to be revealed. Elvis's eyes, still wide with a mix of surprise and bewilderment, finally focused on the rustle behind the curtain. He watched as the thick velvet slowly parted and a small blonde head cautiously emerged. Lisa Marie, her eyes big and bright, a tiny nervous smile on her face, slowly stepped out from her hiding place. Her small body was stiff with apprehension, yet her gaze was fixed on him, a hopeful, expectant sparkle in her eyes. She wasn't hiding completely. Not anymore. She was presenting herself, the artist, for judgment. Elvis looked at his daughter, then back at his reflection in the mirror, then back at Lisa Marie. His brow was still furrowed in a way that wasn't quite a frown, but wasn't quite a smile either. It was the face of a man trying to process something entirely new. something he hadn't encountered in his very unusual life. His lips, now a vibrant pinkish red, twitched. He raised a hand and slowly, deliberately touched his painted lips again. Then his glittery eyelids. He seemed to be checking if it was real, if this vibrant face staring back from the mirror was truly his. Priscilla, standing by the bed, had now dissolved into soft, silent laughter. Her hand still clamped over her mouth. Her shoulders shook and tears of amusement welled in her eyes. She knew. She had known all along, probably the moment she'd seen the little artist peeking from behind the curtain, or even when she'd first seen Elvis's face. Elvis finally looked away from the mirror, his gaze settling fully on Lisa Marie. His expression was unreadable for a moment, and Lisa Marie braced herself. This was it. The moment of truth. Would he be angry? Would he scold her? Then a very slow, very distinct smile began to spread across Elvis's face. It started at the corners of his rosy lips, twitching upwards, and then slowly his deep-set eyes began to crinkle at the corners. The bewilderment was still there, but it was now overlaid with something else. A growing sense of amusement. He didn't laugh out loud yet, not a booming Elvis laugh. It was a silent internal chuckle that slowly began to bubble up. He looked at Lisa Marie with an expression that was both serious and incredibly fond. His eyes, now wide awake, were filled with a love that chased away any fear Lisa Marie might have had. He slowly extended a hand towards her, a silent invitation. Lisa Marie, her nervousness easing, took a hesitant step forward. He patted the bed next to him. She climbed onto the mattress, her small legs dangling over the edge, her eyes still fixed on his face. "Well, now," Elvis said, his voice surprisingly calm, though a hint of amusement was starting to crack through. He slowly lifted a hand to his own face, rubbing a finger over his sparkly eyelid. "What in the good Lord's name happened to my face, little one?" He wasn't angry. He wasn't even annoyed. He was curious and utterly, completely, hilariously surprised. Lisa Marie, emboldened by his gentle tone and the softening of his expression, couldn't help but let out a little giggle. I did it, Daddy," she confessed, her voice a soft whisper, barely audible in the quiet room. Her dimple deepened, her small smile turning into a triumphant grin. "I made you pretty." Elvis stared at her, then back at the mirror, then back at her again. Pretty? That was her artistic vision. He looked at the pink-red lips, the peach cheeks, the blue and gold glitter. Pretty in a very unique, very 6-year-old kind of way. He let out a slow, controlled breath, and Lisa Marie could see his chest begin to shake. The laughter was building inside him, a powerful force that was trying to break free. The initial shock had given way to an overwhelming tide of amusement, all fueled by the innocent pride shining in his daughter's eyes. He closed his eyes for a moment, and Lisa Marie worried for a second he might be disappointed or upset. But then he opened them again, and they were sparkling. He looked at her, then over at Priscilla, who was now openly laughing, a hand covering her mouth to muffle the sound. This was going to be epic. Lisa Marie knew it. The king was about to laugh, and it was all because of her. Elvis took a deep breath, the laughter still bubbling just beneath the surface. He looked at Lisa Marie, his eyes twinkling. "So you did this, did you, little angel?" he asked, his voice soft, almost teasing. "You decided your old daddy needed a little spruce up." Lisa Marie nodded, her blonde pigtails bouncing. Her earlier nervousness was almost completely gone, replaced by a surge of childish pride. "Aha," she chirped. "I used Mama's makeup. The pink lipstick and the red, and the peachy blush, and the blue sparkly stuff, and the gold glitter." She listed her materials with the earnestness of a professional artist, describing her palette. Elvis listened, his head cocked slightly to the side, a smile playing on his lips. He ran a hand over his face again, feeling the textures. "And why, pray tell, did you decide your daddy needed all this embellishment?" he asked, trying to keep a straight face, though his eyes were dancing. Lisa Marie considered the question for a moment, her brow furrowed in thought. Because she explained simply as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. You were sleeping and you looked a little plain, and Mama always looks so pretty with her makeup, so I thought you should be pretty too. Plain, huh? Elvis repeated, a hint of mock indignation in his voice. The king of rock and roll plain? He chuckled softly. And you thought this, he gestured vaguely at his face, would make me pretty? Uh-huh. Lisa Marie confirmed enthusiastically. You look very pretty, Daddy. And sparkly. She reached out a small finger and gently poked one of his glittery eyelids. Elvis winced playfully, not from pain but from the tickle of her finger. He looked at Priscilla, who had now managed to compose herself enough to speak without dissolving into giggles, though her smile was wide and knowing. You say, Priscilla nodded, eyes gleaming. She certainly does, Elvis, a very unique vision. Elvis turned back to Lisa Marie, his expression softening even further. He loved her fiercely, more than anything in the world. And watching her earnest face, full of innocent pride in her artwork, melted any lingering trace of bewilderment he might have felt. He realized this wasn't about being mischievous or naughty. It was about her love, her playfulness, her desire to interact with him even when he was asleep. It was pure, unadulterated affection. You know, little one, he began, his voice taking on a thoughtful, tender tone. Most folks don't get a chance to see their daddy looking quite like this. You think you could give me some tips for my next show? Maybe I should come out on stage with blue glitter eyeshadow? Lisa Marie's eyes lit up. Yes, and red lipstick and rosy cheeks. She bounced excitedly on the bed. Everyone would clap. They'd say, "Oh, Elvis is so pretty." Elvis laughed, a deep warm chuckle that started in his chest and rumbled through the room. Well, I don't know about pretty, but they'd certainly say surprised. He leaned closer to her, his painted face just inches from hers. You're a very clever girl, Lisa Marie, and a very brave one to put all this on a sleeping bear like me. Elvis reached out and pulled her into a warm hug, his arms wrapped around her, holding her close. You never have to be scared of me, darlings, he murmured into her hair. Not when it comes to something like this. This is special. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his eyes shining with affection. You made your daddy laugh, sweetheart, and that's one of the best things you can do. The last remnants of any potential scolding vanished, replaced by a profound wave of love and amusement. King, covered in his daughter's impromptu artwork, looked into her eyes, and all he saw was pure innocent love. The questions were answered now. It was time for the laughter to truly erupt. Elvis, no longer able to contain the sheer hilarity of the situation, threw his head back and let out a booming, unrestrained laugh. It wasn't just a chuckle. It was a deep, belly-shaking roar that filled the grand bedroom, echoing off the walls. Oh, Lord have mercy, he bellowed between peals of laughter, covering his eyes with a hand, then peering out at Lisa. Marie, you little rascal, you got me good. Lisa Marie, seeing her father's joyous reaction, dissolved into giggles herself. Her relief was immense. He wasn't mad. He was loving it. She bounced up and down on the bed, joining in his merriment. Priscilla, who had been struggling to keep her own laughter quiet, now let it out freely, leaning against the doorframe, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. The sound of their combined laughter was infectious. Suddenly, footsteps could be heard rushing down the hallway. Members of the Graceland staff, perhaps roused by the unusual uproar, or maybe curious about why the king's bedroom was shaking with such joyous noise, began to gather outside the door. Joe Esposito, Elvis's close friend and road manager, peered into the room, followed by Charlie Hodge, one of Elvis's longtime friends and musicians, and a few others from the Memphis Mafia. Their faces, initially curious, morphed into expressions of utter shock, then quickly, hilariously, into uncontrolled laughter as they took in the sight of Elvis Presley, the living legend, sitting on his bed adorned with layers of colorful. Elvis! What in the world? Joe managed to gasp out, clutching his stomach as he succumbed to a fit of laughter. Charlie Hodge, usually so composed, doubled over, tears streaming down his face. "My Lord King, did you get into Priscilla's makeup box?" Elvis, still roaring with laughter, pointed a finger at Lisa Marie, who was now beaming, utterly delighted by the spectacle she had caused. "No, sir. This here," he managed to choke out, gesturing to his face, "is the work of my very own personal makeup artist, Lisa Marie Presley." More laughter erupted from the doorway. Everyone found it utterly hilarious. They had seen Elvis in thousands of different outfits with different heralds, but never ever like this. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated joy and absurdity. Elvis, still laughing, reached out and pulled Lisa Marie into another tight hug, burying his glittery face in her hair. "You did a fine job, sweetheart." He muffled his voice thick with emotion and laughter. "You made your daddy the prettiest king in all of Tennessee." Lisa Marie hugged him back, feeling the rumble of his laughter against her chest. She was so happy. This was better than any present, any candy. She had made her daddy laugh like this, truly. Laugh with all his heart. Priscilla came over to the bed, still chuckling. She pulled out a small camera from her pocket. "We have to get a picture of this, Elvis," she said, her voice full of warmth. "This is a moment for the family album." Elvis pulled away from Lisa Marie, striking a playful pose for the camera, puckered his pink and red lips, batted his glittery eyelids, and puffed out his rosy cheeks. Everyone in the doorway roared with fresh laughter. Flash! The camera clicked, capturing the unique, heartwarming moment for eternity. She felt like the most special girl in the world. Her daddy, the king, was proud of her art, and he was so happy. His infectious laughter filled the room, a sound that would echo in Lisa Marie's heart for years to come. Elvis, true to his word, kept the makeup on for a good while. He strolled out of the bedroom. Lisa Marie perched happily on his hip, proudly displaying his new look to anyone and everyone he encountered. Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, walked into the living room and froze, staring before letting out a hearty guffaw that rivaled Elvis's own. Even Elvis's security guards, who rarely showed anything but stoicism, broke into broad smiles and chuckles. "This here is the latest fashion, folks," Elvis announced with a dramatic flourish, gesturing to his face. "Courtesy of my very own personal stylist, Miss Lisa Marie Presley." Lisa Marie preened, basking in the attention and the waves of laughter that followed her and her daddy. It felt like the whole house was filled with joy, all because of her silly idea. Elvis didn't just laugh it off, he embraced the moment fully. He sat on the sofa with Lisa Marie nestled beside him and began to tell stories, his voice warm and animated, his pink-red lips moving expressively. He recounted tales of funny things that had happened on tour, silly pranks he or the guys had pulled. He even sang a few silly songs, adapting the lyrics to include his new pretty face, making Lisa Marie shriek with laughter. "Oh, the king, he woke up a bit sleepy and slow," he crooned, his eyes twinkling. But his sweet little girl put on quite a show with red lips and cheeks and eyes that did gleam. He was the prettiest king, a sparkly sweet dream. Lisa Marie snuggled closer, feeling safe and utterly cherished in her daddy's arms. This was what love felt like. It wasn't just about big hugs or presents, but about shared laughter, about being silly together, about knowing that he loved her so much he would let her draw all over his face, and then be proud of it. Later, as the afternoon started to fade into evening, Elvis finally decided it was time to clean up. He went into the bathroom, Lisa Marie trailing right behind him. He looked at his reflection one last time, a wide grin on his face. "Well, little Picasso," he said, turning to her, "you did a mighty fine job, but I reckon the world ain't quite ready for a king with a permanent sparkly face." He picked up a washcloth, wet it with warm water, and gently began to wipe away the makeup. Lisa Marie watched a tiny bit sad to see her masterpiece disappear, but knowing that the memory of it would last, the pink lipstick came off first, then the peach blush. The glitter, however, was stubborn. It clung to his eyelashes and eyebrows, shimmering stubbornly. "Looks like you used some of Priscilla's extra-strength sparkle." Elvis chuckled, rubbing a little harder. "I'll be finding this in my pillowcase for a week." Lisa Marie giggled. "It's special sparkle, Daddy." He finished cleaning his face, his handsome features reappearing fresh and clean. He looked at himself in the mirror, then at Lisa Marie. He reached out and gently ruffled her hair. "You know, Lisa Marie," he said, his voice soft and sincere, "you don't need makeup to make people smile. You just being you, my sweet girl, is the prettiest thing in the world." He pulled her into another hug, a warm, comforting embrace. "This was a real treat, darling, a real memory we just made. Thank you for making your daddy feel so pretty," he winked at her. Lisa Marie hugged him tightly, burying her face in his shoulder. She felt so full of happiness. Her daddy, the biggest star in the world, had let her paint his face. He had laughed, he had loved it, and he had told her she was pretty just as she was. It was a moment of pure, unconditional love, a silly, heartwarming episode that solidified their already special bond. She knew in that moment that she was the luckiest girl in the world to have a daddy like Elvis. As the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, the memory of Lisa Marie's makeup escapade on Elvis became a cherished family legend at Graceland. It was a story, often recounted, always with fond smiles and hearty laughter. Especially when new visitors or friends came over. "You should have seen him," Priscilla would often exclaim, her eyes sparkling with amusement, gesturing dramatically. He woke up looking like a clown from a fancy circus. Pink lips, rosy cheeks, and that glitter. Oh, that glitter was everywhere. And Elvis would chuckle, shaking his head. "My own little artist she was. Said I looked plain." Imagine that. The king plain. He'd always follow it with a proud glance at Lisa Marie, who would beam, remembering the joy and excitement of that afternoon. Lisa Marie, now a little older, still adored playing with her mother's makeup. But she never again attempted to use her sleeping father as a canvas. Not because she was afraid of getting in trouble, but because that one time had been perfect. It was a unique, spontaneous moment of pure childhood. Mischief and parental love that couldn't be plick or pate. It was a memory, a special secret shared between just them, even if everyone else knew about it. Now, too, the incident reinforced the deep, loving bond between father and daughter. Lisa Marie knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that her daddy loved her unconditionally. He wasn't just the king to the world. To her, he was her silly, wonderful daddy, who would let her put makeup on him and then laugh about it with pure delight. He was the kind of father who embraced her imagination, who celebrated her whimsy, and who always made her feel cherished. Sometimes, when she was feeling a little sad or just wanted a hug, she'd remember the way his big, booming laugh had filled the room, how his eyes had crinkled with amusement, and how he'd told her she was pretty just the way she was. It was a reminder of his boundless affection, a comforting thought that warmed her heart. Even when Elvis was away on tour, the thought of that day made her smile. She knew that no matter how famous he was, no matter how many people adored him around the world, she had a special place in his heart. She was the one who had made the king sparkly. One quiet evening, just before bedtime, Elvis sat on the edge of Lisa Marie's bed, tucking her in. He sang her a soft lullaby, his voice a gentle murmur, so different from the powerful voice that electrified stadiums. As he finished, he leaned down and kissed her forehead. "You know, little monkey," he whispered, "I think that was the prettiest I ever felt." "All because of you, Lisa," Marie giggled, pulling her blanket up to her chin. "You are very pretty, Daddy," she said, her eyes already growing heavy. "And you're the best daddy in the whole wide world." Elvis smiled, a soft, tender smile that reached his eyes. He brushed a stray strand of hair from her face. "And you, my sweet girl, are the best daughter a man could ever ask for." He kissed her again, a lingering, loving kiss. "Good night, my little artist." As he quietly left the room, leaving her in the comforting glow of her nightlight, Lisa Marie closed her eyes. The image of her daddy, with his pink lips and glittery eyes, floated in her mind, a precious, heartwarming memory. It wasn't just a story. It was a testament to a father's boundless love and a daughter's innocent joy, forever etched in the history of Graceland. And in the heart of a little girl, it was the day she made the king of rock and roll. Truly, beautifully, sparkly,